This is episode number 524 of the Health and Fitness Podcast by InnerFight, brought to you in association with Smith Street Paleo. Thanks a lot for tuning in to this episode of the show. Please do hop over to our sponsor, Smith Street Paleo's website, smithstreetpaleo.com. Check out all of the meal plans you can get over there. Hundreds of different recipes, and if you've got a sweet tooth, lots of paleo sweet treats to satisfy that. smithstreetpaleo.com is where you need to go. Some of you may remember the name Jamie Sparks. He was on the show talking about Ultra X just a few months back. Well, I've got him back on the show today during a visit. He's here in Dubai, and during his visit, he took some time out to talk to me about some of the incredible things that he's done, namely rowing across the Atlantic, and then 6 months later, setting off and rowing across the Indian Ocean. He holds 6 world records, or did hold 6 world records for rowing. A couple of them have fallen since he did his rowing attempts, but this is an absolutely incredible show. I learned a lot from Jamie on this show, and he shares it in a very inspiring way. And as he says, when something pops up, just say yes. Awesome show, awesome guy. I really hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get into today's show. Here we are then, back with another edition of the show, and this is the first time that I think I've interviewed someone who has done something so huge as my guest today. Jamie Sparks, mate, you have rowed across the Atlantic Ocean.
It's true, mate. Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and that's an extremely kind introduction.
No, mate.
Down here from now.
It's huge. We have a mutual friend, actually, Omar Noor, who tried to row across the Atlantic but failed. Shame about that one. And his story is so precious that he hasn't let us release it on the podcast despite doing a talk here. So I'm super excited to talk to you about your row, mate. And I think everyone would appreciate or love to hear how on earth one wakes up one morning and says they're going to row across the Atlantic Ocean.
I know, mate. It's well, they say half the battle is getting to the start line, and it's true. I was 21 at the time. Well, maybe 20, in fact, and I was at university. It was in my freshers week. I'd just come off a year of traveling.
Yeah.
And I could see the next 3 years of university being what I'd already done, which was, getting pissed and getting fat and not working particularly hard. And I just had this great deep need within me to do something which I thought would set me apart from the rest, to do like an epic challenge. So I remember going online on Amazon and ordering James Cracknell's trio of adventurers, and he had Hottest Race on Earth, which was him doing the marathon to Saab.
Yeah.
He had one of him rowing the Atlantic and the Coldest Race on Earth. And I watched the rowing the Atlantic one, which he did with Ben Fogle, and I thought, holy shit, who the hell would want to do that?
Yeah.
That is everything I fear. We've all watched The Perfect Storm with George Clooney, and that's what I thought the middle of the ocean would be like.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I just couldn't get it out of my head. If I could get through that,
yeah,
which I'd pictured as hell on earth, and it turned out to be just that, then surely I could get through anything on earth.
Yeah, right.
And I texted my best mate immediately.
Yeah.
And I said, Luke, I gave him all the reasons why it would make us more employable when we entered the job market. It would look good on our CV. And he just replied, yes, I'm in.
Really?
And so I went down to the bank. I paid our registration fees, both of our fees, which was 1,000 quid, 500 each, out of my student loan. and then 1 year later, after a ton of fundraising, found ourselves in La Gomera, which is a little island in the Canary Islands off the coast of Morocco, ready to try and row a little boat 3,000 miles across the Atlantic.
Mate, you've made it sound very sort of straightforward and very like, I just wake up and I go down to the bank and I pay a deposit and I send a text to my mate and it all kind of comes to fruition. But talk to us, I think a good place to start, mate, is talk to us about the stats of the Atlantic. You're reading James Cracknell's book. What really jumped out? Was it the distance? What is the distance? Talk to us a little bit about the task itself, because I think that's interesting for people to understand.
Yeah, so there are 3 main oceans in the world. Well, the one other than the southern and the Arctic, which is frozen. There's the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Indian. And the Atlantic has big old trade winds which blow across. So they say if you put a ham sandwich in a boat and push it off, you will eventually get across the Atlantic. It's 3,000 miles.
So it's quite easy then.
Yeah, I don't know. Some people, it's 3,000 miles. the waves will literally at some point get to 40 feet high,
Wow.
which is, a couple of stories.
Yeah.
The wind gets up to, at times, 35 knots, which makes you feel very, very small. We ate 12,000 calories per day.
Wow.
Every 2 hours we were eating. You row in 2 hours on, 2 hours off shifts.
Yeah.
So you never get more than about 80 minutes sleep. And the world record, I think, back then was around 40 days, but people have taken anything up to 120 days to cross.
So you read this stuff in Cracknell's book?
Yeah, I mean, I watched the DVD, and then I just started researching it heavily. I could not get it out of my head. But I also didn't even know where to start. Back in 2013, a handful of people had crossed then.
Yeah.
Now it seems like it's a bit more mainstream, but back then there was nowhere to go to get all this information. So you just had to figure out yourselves and read blogs. And there's no way that I could ever have realized or predicted just how much it would change my life and affect everything I've ever done since.
Mate, I want to definitely get into that because I think that's super interesting, and we're going to talk about challenges and why people should do them. But you've signed up, you've put the money down, you've registered, you've spent your student loan on this, which is actually a great way to spend a student loan because, as you alluded to earlier, the other option of spending a student loan is across a bar, which doesn't pay too much return, although it gives you, I think at times, quite good entertainment. How did you then, you said you read some blogs, how did you then start to prepare for this?
So it's flipping expensive, is worth saying. I mean, it's pretty much going to cost you 80,000 quid, British pounds, which is a crazy amount of money. 40,000 of that goes to buying yourself a 24-foot plywood rowing boat with a cabin to sleep in at one end.
Right.
Then you've got to buy £10,000 worth of dehydrated food, which is like dust.
£10,000 on food.
Yeah, I mean, 2 people eating 6 meals a day.
Wow.
And you have to have up to 90 days worth of food supply for both of you.
Just in case it goes a little bit wrong.
Exactly. And then you've got to spend 10 grand on kit. We have all the offshore wet weather gear you could imagine, all the navigational kit, because, you've got to have all sorts of GPSs and nautical charts on board so you know where the hell you are.
I'm interested to hear a little bit about that, mate. Talk us through, we'll come back, you go very fast. There's a lot of very interesting points here, but talk us about that, like your skills of navigation at sea. How do you learn about that? How does all that go down?
Well, a lot of people say, okay, so you must have been an experienced sailor before you tried to row the Atlantic. And no, I'd done a tiny bit of sailing. I'd never rowed. I'd never rowed on a river. They say a lot of people get very frustrated, a lot of river rowers get frustrated when they try and row the ocean because it's not comparable.
Why is that?
Because technique isn't important.
Right.
Technique's crucial on a river, but when you're out in the ocean, every third stroke, because of the waves, you miss and you just fly
just
back
an
to
air
the back
stroke.
of the sea.
Really? But had you done rowing though, mate? Had you been on Concept 2s? Like
We'd Luke and I, my rowing partner, we made sure that we spent a couple of hours a week on Concept 2s, just getting ready, getting used to the motion. But really, the training for something like this is
couple of hours a week.
Yeah, I know it's nothing.
Hang on.
You just got to get strong. So we did loads of compound lifting, loads of squats. We gained 10 to 15 kilos each.
Wow.
But then the preparation comes down to just learning about the boat and the ocean.
Yeah.
So we did tons of courses, navigational courses, VHF certificate, which is supposedly means that we can communicate via radio to tankers and other ships in the areas.
Wow.
And we did a star course, supposedly. So if all our navigation, our power broke down, supposedly we'd be able to navigate off the stars, which, is rubbish because we wouldn't have had a chance.
How confident were you going in with that under your belt?
Not confident at all.
Really?
But we also had different roles on board. So Luke, he's more academic than myself.
Right.
He was very good at the navigational stuff. And then I took care of other areas. I'm a lot more organized than he was.
Right.
And you've got to approach something like this with military precision. I mean, you had to know exactly how many calories you had, all the equipment, where all the equipment was on board, so that if an emergency happened, you'd be able to locate this quickly.
Yeah.
That's why they say it's so tough just to get to the start line, because you have to jump through so many hoops.
Was there times, sort of when you're on the way to the start line, mate, in the months leading up to it, that all of this stuff became probably quite overwhelming? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, you spend a year telling people you're about to do this, and then with 8 weeks to go, you realize, oh shit, this no longer am I going to be telling people this. I actually have to do it now. And you've persuaded sponsors to put tens of thousands of pounds behind you, and you've said that you're going to get so and so world records, and then suddenly you find yourself at the start line. And you've never been out of sight of land before. You don't even know what you're going to feel like when you get out there and you've got nothing but a rowing seat, oars, and your buddy to get you through this. It's the biggest leap of faith you can ever do, I reckon.
Yeah, I think that's something that happens a lot when you're doing a challenge. You sort of you sign up to it, the whole process, and for me, and it sounds like for you as well, mate. Like, it's quite an interesting time. That, you know, the planning. I love the planning and getting everything in order, but then you have this moment of, I don't know if you'd call it clarity, or something happens a few weeks before. In your case, maybe 8 weeks out. You're like, we're going to be pushing off from La Gomera, and then it becomes very real.
And we were so young and inexperienced, and you know, you have years of experience on your side, and usually you do trips or adventures or events that build you up to something big in your life like this. But I'd never done anything even close to this scale.
Really?
I'd never even run marathons. Yeah, so I was so much jumping in the deep end.
Why not? And why did you choose this as the first one?
I thought, if I can do this, I can do anything.
Really?
Yeah.
That was a mindset.
Yeah, it's literally that I'm gonna skip all the marathons and the ultras and the sailing the Atlantic, and I'm gonna go straight into the deep end. And if I can get through this, I can get through anything in life.
But you're very young at this stage as well, mate. You're still at uni. Would you be one of the youngest people to have?
We were the youngest people ever.
Really?
Yeah. Any ocean.
Are you in the Guinness Book of Records?
Yeah.
Oh.
I've got 6.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell us about them, mate.
I think some have been broken now, but we were the youngest pair ever to row any ocean.
Right.
So
therefore the youngest to row the Atlantic as well. So you get 2 records there. Good old Guinness.
And then I think we were the fastest as well at the time.
Really?
And then the other 4 from the Indian Ocean. I did the Indian Ocean 6 months after as well. So
wow.
And far fewer people have done the Indian than they've done the Atlantic. So I think we were the first 4 to row the Indian, the fastest 4 again. I was the youngest double ocean rower ever. So they get pretty pathetic records when ocean rowing's a small world, mate. So
I think it is. I think that you kind of have I don't know how many people. I was reading something yesterday where I think there's only a few thousand people have swum across the English Channel.
Yeah.
Which I was actually quite surprised about. And I think there's some stats around the Atlantic which makes it not many people have done it. But I think that also speaks to me as though that's because it's so challenging, and obviously, unlike Everest, not really very commercial, mate.
Yeah, I mean, they say that more people have been into space than have rowed the Atlantic.
Wow.
That might have changed now because it was 5 years ago I did it, but it takes an enormous amount of preparation, enormous amount of training, and so much commitment. I mean, the thing we had with youth on our side, we didn't have families, we didn't have jobs.
You just had uni degrees,
exactly,
which are not important.
They were literally not important. I mean, the university made me take a year out to take on this challenge.
Wow.
Which my dad wasn't particularly happy about. He said if you had to decide between university and rowing, then you should definitely choose university. And I'm just not wired that way. I mean, I'm just interested in doing things that other people wouldn't necessarily want to do.
Yeah. So how did you manage that, mate, from a family perspective? Because I think it's important you have family support, but I'm not saying that your dad didn't support you, just in case he listens. But you know, he's saying maybe you should do uni, and you're saying no, I'm going to row an ocean.
You absolutely need family behind you, and they were definitely the reason we got to the start line. Luke, my rowing part's family, and my family helped us out so much, but it took a long time to persuade them we were serious. Because, you know, we were 2 21-year-olds, we were idiots, we would muck around, and we were forever saying that we're going to do so-and-so.
Yeah.
And people don't believe you unless you literally show them. You know, that's like so much in life. Like, so many people chat, but not many people follow through.
Yeah, right.
So I think once we paid the registration fee, once we started looking for boats, once we took the training seriously, once we signed up for the race, because it was a race after all, then they started buying into this project.
Yeah.
And the cause was great. I mean, Luke's mum had just had a double mastectomy from breast cancer, and she's fine now. But it was worrying at the time, and we raised money for breast cancer care, and we raised £315,000.
Talk us through that, mate. You've banged out a few different stats. You've got £10,000 worth of food. You've got to buy this boat, and at the same time, you've raised all of that money for a great cause. Talk us through how you went about that, because I imagine 2 uni students. It's like, oh yeah, these guys got drunk and now they think they're going to do this. People that you must have met a lot of resistance in that area as well, raising funds.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to persuade a sponsor that you're going to get them an enormous amount of reach, marketing, kickback, and they've got to buy into your brand. And because we were 2 young kids, it was a real struggle. You think you're going to go into these challenges and you're going to raise 50K from so-and-so, 100K from so-and-so, and then you're almost fully funded. But what actually happens is a battle, like so much in life. You get 10K here, 10K there, 7 people give you 2K, and you just cram the money together and hope that it's enough. So it's an enormous achievement, just getting the funds together, and that's why so many people fail to get to the start line. Yeah,
I can imagine. Was there times along the way where you felt like you were fighting quite an uphill battle to get all of your funding and getting these things in place?
It was a battle from day one, but never ever did I not believe we were going to get to the start line. You know,
why?
It's such a cliche that people say that they just knew they were going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so you have to £20,000 goes to the race entry fee and the support. It's called the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge, is the race, and they provide you with so much, and the success rate for getting across the ocean is infinitely higher if you do it in the race.
Right.
But if we'd failed to get so-and-so funding, we would have just done it independently.
Right.
We would have just cast ourselves off from a Spanish island somewhere and hoped that we got across with no support.
Why is that different? That's quite an interesting thing you said. So you pay £20,000 to enter the race, and in this race you get support. How do they support you, mate?
It's actually in the year before. They teach you everything you need to know. So they put you on all the courses, all the first aid, all the safety. They take you through all their kit list, and whilst they're harsh, they will not let you start unless you have every single piece of kit on the equipment list, and it is vast. And they will not let you start unless you've proven that you know exactly how to use it all.
Right.
And then they demand that you have, I think, 100 hours of rowing experience, of which a certain number of hours have to be at night time.
Wow.
So they will not let you start unless they gauge that you're ready.
Wow.
And then when you actually start the race, there's a safety yacht, or 2 in fact, I think now, because the fleet's bigger. And those sailing yachts would support you in an emergency situation.
So what they're doing, they're preparing you in a way that obviously their race stays quite safe, which is cool. You said something there about 100 hours of rowing training. Talk to us a little bit about that. How did it go, mate? And were there times when you, like, what was the first time like that you just sort of thought, oh my goodness, I've been out here for 2 hours and I've got to get across a whole ocean?
I have a story which is exactly how you just set it up there. I mean, the first time you see the boat, firstly, you're like, oh my God, how am I going to live on this for this afternoon?
Yeah.
Let alone for 2-3 months. There's a tiny sleeping cabin at one end, which is about 6'4" long. So I had an inch under my feet.
Yeah.
It's about 1.5 feet tall. It gets so hot in there during the day that your sweat evaporates, hits the ceiling, condenses, and then comes back down on you.
Is that refreshing?
It's not as refreshing as it sounds actually out there.
It sounds really nice, mate.
But the first week we started, I went to sleep. I managed to get some sleep. I was exhausted, and I woke up thinking that it was a training row and that we were about to turn around and come back to land and go in a hotel like we've been doing for the past year of training. And when it hit me that we were just on day 4 of however many months at sea, it killed me. And I just broke down into tears.
Really?
And just didn't know how I could carry on. Yeah.
How did you carry on?
You have no choice. That's what I always say
so
about these events.
a little bit of a cry and then crack on.
I mean, when you're doing running a marathon or a cycling event or lifting heavy weights, if it gets too much, you put it down. You get off. You sit down.
Yeah.
There's no one to pick you up when you're at sea.
Right.
You have nothing but yourself, an ocean rowing boat, and your rowing buddy to get you through it. So the highs and lows are tremendous.
Yeah.
I've never ever felt the lows I felt out there.
Yeah.
And I've never ever felt the highs either.
I'm not sure if people can understand the highs or the lows, mate. Try and describe them to us, because I think a lot of people, we're actually having this conversation, folks that have cottoned on to you and are obviously watching the video version and see Ultra X on your cap, might have heard your voice before. You're obviously now, and we're going to speak about that later, running Ultra X, and we had Jamie on the show a few weeks ago, a couple of months back. When we came back from your race in Sri Lanka, you sort of try and start to describe it to people, but you just can't, because you know that they're trying their hardest to understand you, but it's very difficult, isn't it? Talk to us about that and some of the highs and lows that you had, and how do you explain them? How do you deal with them?
So the boredom is the one thing that gets to you more than anything out there.
Wow.
So you're supposed to take hundreds of hours of audiobooks and of music, but on day 10, my 2 iPods had both broken from saltwater damage. So for the next 40-odd days, I had nothing but my thoughts to think about. And by week 3, I'd thought about every memory I could conjure up in my mind twice over.
Wow.
And I remember just crawling into the cabin after my 2-hour shift and just breaking down into tears, because I had thought about everything I could possibly think about.
You'd done it.
I'd done
You're
my
at the
life.
end of the book.
Yeah, I'm at the end of the book, but I was not even halfway across this
Wow.
savage challenge that was breaking our bodies down and our minds at an even faster rate.
Yeah.
So the mental challenge is more than the physical. The physical is still diabolical in itself. I mean, you row naked because you're getting splashed by the water all the time, and the water dries off, but the salt crystals stay, and they chafe, and and your bum, the sores, they turn into craters, literally holes in your ass.
Wow.
And what you do in normal life is just rest it, or expose it, get air to it.
Yeah.
But you've got to be back on your ass every 2 hours, for 2 hours, moving up and down.
How do you manage that then?
You can't manage anything in an hour and 59 minutes, which is all you have off. You've got, if you have blisters and huge boils on your hands, you've got to cut them open with scalpels, get all the pus out. You've got to put surgical spirit on to kill the nerves underneath. You've got to constantly try and air anything which is, wet and getting manky. All you have to clean yourself really is baby wipes.
Wow.
So by the halfway point, you're on serious painkillers like tramadol, which is basically the most
that stuff's horrific.
hardcore tranquilizer you can have.
Yeah.
So the physical battle is terrible, but easily worse is the mental barrier. It is the mental stress that your body's under. And Luke and I fell out on day 10. We started
Pretty early.
arguing, way too early. I mean, we were young kids and we didn't respect each other.
Right.
And what that means is that we weren't on time for each other's shifts.
Eesh.
And all you care about when you're out there is your 1 hour and 59 minutes off.
Yeah.
You live for that.
Right.
So if he's 5 minutes late or even 3 minutes late, that's an hour and 55. And he's shitting on your dreams by just showing that little bit of lack of care.
Yeah.
And so we stopped talking around day 10, which means that not only had my entertainment died, but I basically was rowing alone because he was sleeping and we weren't talking.
Wow.
We got into a really unhealthy relationship, and I haven't really spoken about it like publicly ever because what happens at sea stays at sea.
Yeah, right.
Until now. And we basically used every shift changeover as an opportunity to like swear at each other and tell the other person how little they'd rowed on the GPS.
No way.
That's the unhealthiest relationship you can get at sea is when you're comparing who rows further, because that's not important.
No.
Like, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And then at the halfway point, we were really hating each other, and we were switching over shifts, and I just sat on my seat and pulled the straps over my shoes, and I'd said something, and he spat at me. And I said, "Spit at me one more time, I'm going to kill you." And he did. And I lunged for him, and he just had 1 foot in the cabin. And he had enough time, a couple of seconds, because I was trying to get my feet out to get inside and lock the cabin. And I lunged at the door. And it was in the middle of the night, I think. And I was hitting at the door. I'm going to fucking kill you. I'm going to fucking kill you.
Wow.
And I then tried to jump over the solar panels to get in through the emergency hatch. And at that point, I came to and I was like, okay, if I fall into the sea now, I'm gone.
He's killed you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I just sat at the panel saying, I hate you, and then had to get back on the oars. And 2 hours later, Luke hadn't come out, obviously, because we'd had this awful row, and I just said, mate, I'm so sorry. Please, can you come and take the oars, because there's no backup option. And he did, but we didn't really get on for the rest of the crossing, and we didn't speak for a year after, once we got to land.
Wow. I was actually gonna ask you sort of how the relationship is now, but you've jumped to that, mate. I mean, that must be quite brutal. You're 10 days in. How long did it take you?
54 days.
54 days. So you've got 44 days left, folks. You know that's over a month and a half, or basically a month and a half. How did you do it, mate?
Because you tell yourself for an entire year that this is the one thing you want to achieve more than anything in your life.
Yeah.
And if you die the following year, it won't matter because you will have ticked off this enormous challenge, and you tell yourself that that's enough in your life.
Yeah.
That's how big it was.
Wow.
Obviously, 5 years later, I don't care about that. I'm just trying to achieve the next thing. It may as well have not happened. But at the time, you have no choice. I said I would try and play to myself scenarios at sea if I wasn't able to cope. How would I get over certain things? What were my coping mechanisms?
Yeah.
And I told myself that if I got into a panic attack for whatever reason, I would just somehow try and shut it out and just carry on the oars.
Wow.
And, to go back to how do you deal with the emotions, when you see the mileometer, going from 3,000 miles to 2,000 to 500 to 100, and that you've suddenly got 2 days left. And then suddenly the clouds that are constantly in the distance for you turn into mountains, and it's land, and it's the first land you've seen. And then you start seeing colors, and the grey, gunmetal grey of the ocean starts turning, lighter and lighter blue, and then turquoise.
Yeah.
And then the grey of the island turns into green and palm trees. It's like every dream you've ever wished for in your entire life coming true. It's
really?
like you've had the most incredible heroine on earth, and nothing has even got close to the feeling that you feel like when you step on board and your wildest dreams have come true.
That's probably one of the most incredible descriptions I've ever heard. Congratulations again on what you've done, mate. It's phenomenal. I don't know why this mic is chipping. Do you think that you would appreciate that as much if you hadn't been through what you'd been through?
Not a chance. And that's the upsetting thing about feeling like that, is you have to go through hell to get there. If you're having a good time, or if something's not that hard, finishing will never be that good.
Yeah.
There's, I think, a direct consequence between how tough you find something and then the pleasure of finishing.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to do harder and harder things in life to get the same kick.
Yeah.
It's like soldiers, they get addicted to the rush of battle and, rounds going over their heads. And then when they come back to normal life, you can't recreate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I did the Indian 6 months later, the finish was extraordinary, but nothing will ever compare to that first dose of, oh my God.
Because the Atlantic was so hard.
Yeah.
We'll come to the Indian in a second, mate. What I want to speak about a little bit is how you coped with the extreme fatigue. Again, I think it's so simple for you to sit there and say, 1 hour 59, and that was it, and 2 hours on, and just scalping these things off my hands, and volcanoes in my anus, and all this kind of stuff. Is like everyone's just thinking, oh my goodness. How did you, I think on dry land, or I'm sure on dry land, people could not cope with 2 hours sleep, 2 hours physical exercise for... Be an interesting experiment, wouldn't it? Try and do that for a week or something and see what shape they end up in. When did it get difficult? How did you cope with it, mate?
You row really hard at the start because the gun's going off. It's the first and the last time you're going to see another 12 boats around you. You've got this amazing adrenaline rush. And you're rowing at like a silly... rate per minute, and it's unobtainable. And then after the 2 hours, you're exhausted, and then you get into your cabin and you're like, right, I've got 2 hours left off. And then by the second 2 hours and the third 2 hours, you're a broken person.
Really?
And you think, okay, my body's just going to adapt. But actually, you just get more and more tired as it goes on.
Yeah.
And during the day, when you're on circadian rhythm, like when it's light, it's okay to cope. But during the night shifts, we basically have 3 day shifts and 3 night shifts each.
Right.
And the middle night shift is the worst by far because you've been woken up in the middle of, it's the best sleep you've had probably in the most recent 24 hours.
Yeah.
Then you've got to leave your warm, dry cabin and face whatever weather, whether it's storming, whether it's dead flat, you've just got to go out there. And sometimes you'll leave the cabin dry, really optimistic, get in your seat and you'll be whacked by, and then you'll be freezing for the next, 2 hours. So the sleep you never really get used to. you just get used to waking up every 2 hours thinking, I hate my life.
Really? How do you do that though, mate? How do you continue? Because obviously a lot of the stuff that I've done has a very a shorter time span. Even when I was doing my marathons, I was getting home every day and Holly was cooking nice food and I slept in my nice bed. What is it that makes it, like, how do people get through it?
Well, I think firstly, you've got to want it more than anything else on earth.
Yeah.
As soon as you realize you don't want it that much, you'll call for a rescue. And that's really complicated. That's the most dangerous part, is basically being rescued by a container ship. But you've got to come into this.
Speak to Omar Noor.
Yeah, exactly.
Plenty of Egyptian container ships out there.
He's got an amazing and harrowing story for sure. But you've got to want it more than anything. And you've got to do it for your own body. Even though you might not be liking each other,
yes,
you do it for each other. It's that teamwork. And like I said before, I mean, you have no choice.
Yeah.
If you don't get up for your next shift, your buddy's going to have to do that.
Yeah.
And the one thing that you don't want to happen more than your own rowing shift is to let him down.
Right.
So teamwork is so
But you wanted
important.
to kill him 5 minutes ago, mate.
I did want to kill him, it's true. I did want to kill him. Sometimes I wish that, no, I didn't wish that Wave would ever take him. I want to say at this point that we're best mates again and that there's no way I would have got through it without him. But we were just so similar. Yeah. What happens when you do it with someone that you know too well is you don't make an effort.
Yes.
It's like a brother. If you do it with someone that you know well, but not too well, you'll make an effort to be on time.
Right.
To keep the cabin clean.
Did you guys go through all of that before? Did you sort of have a pre-race, okay, yeah, our commitment to each other has always been on time. Our commitment to each other is this. Did you put that in place?
You try and simulate what you're going to go throughout there as much as possible. But really, we just had this brotherly bond where we said that we were not going to come back home unless it was by stepping onto shore in Antigua.
Wow.
And that we would rather die than come back having to tell our parents that big dream is still a big dream, and that the £100,000 we've raised from sponsors has sunk.
Yeah.
So you try and simulate what you can, but that's the amazing thing about ocean rowing as opposed to competitive cycling or running, is you cannot simulate the weather you're going to be in until you get out there.
Yeah.
And the weather at times is petrifyingly scary. Yes. Especially at night when you can't see it.
I wanted to ask that, mate. I'm not a massive fan of sort of talking about the weather, blaming things on the weather. I mean, when we were recently in Sri Lanka, we know it's going to be hot, so it shouldn't be a surprise. But I know from what I've read about the Atlantic and the people I've spoken to that have crossed it, books we've read, the weather is really huge, mate. Talk us through that a little bit and talk us through those sort of petrifying times, because I'm sure there were many.
There were many, but the human mind is amazing in terms of making something that was scary one day, normality the next. So when you start, it's terrifying. That first time the sun goes down at night and the waves get a little bit bigger because you're no longer sheltered by the island. Something which terrifies you on night one is normality by night 3.
Wow.
And then by the time you get maybe 500 miles out into the Atlantic, and the waves just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And luckily, because waves crash, either because the wind is high or because the seabed gets shallow, luckily it's so deep out there that they just go over you, and you think you're going to get flipped by these huge 40-foot rollers, but actually, and then you just find yourself on top again. Most of the time.
See, this is, even if you're trying to comprehend this, folks, it's very difficult, right? You just get flipped and then you're just on top of you. I mean, mate, that in itself is just, it's so hard for us to believe, having not experienced it.
It is, and it's even more terrifying when the wind gets high, because then these waves start breaking on you. And I can't remember what it was, but one night waves were crashing over the boat. So they weren't slipping under us like they were 90% of the time. They were actually breaking like they were on shore. Wow. And I remember getting hit and my foot plates, the screws being pulled out and being thrown back against the back of the boat, and lifting my feet up, still in the foot straps, but the strap wasn't attached to the boat anymore. And that's usually when you'd call it. Bear in mind, you've got serious weather, so you've got to quickly pick up an oar and try and keep your boat in line with the waves, because that's when you're safe. It's when you let your boat turn side on that it gets flipped. And that's when you'd be like, right, I'm done. But you have no choice. Yeah. It's as dangerous.
It comes back to the same thing, yeah.
But you just you just do what you can. So it was head torch on, screwdriver out, and try and get through the next 24 hours. And then when sun comes up every morning, you kind of feel like that's another battle that you've survived.
Yeah, that must be quite... There must be some things of nature along the way that really gave you energy. You described amazingly the finish, mate, but sunrise, that must have been something that was just huge.
And like, 1,000 pods of dolphins, every other day.
No way.
Yeah, whales. But not to put a downer on things, but you kind of don't give a shit about dolphins by day 3 because they're everywhere. It's the things that people think are going to lift your spirits, so you're like, oh, just another dolphin. The things that get you energetic when whales or shark. We didn't see a shark, but some people have seen big sharks get close to the boat because they can damage your boat. They've been known to flip boats or knock rudders off. And the only thing that's really going to stop you getting across is if your boat breaks.
Yeah.
Out of the 16 boats that did our race, I think 15 capsized.
Wow.
Sometimes more than once, and we were the only boat that didn't.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. There are many occasions where we had to throw our weight to one side of the boat to make sure it didn't capsize.
Yeah.
But we were really strict on trying to keep it dead on with the waves.
Right.
You can either get flipped side over side, or what some people do, which is really unfortunate and often leads to them being rescued, is they surf a wave, but then they nose plant, and the boat comes end over end and lands on top of them, and that is that can be catastrophic.
Absolutely.
If you lose the boat, your number one rule, your 2 rules are golden in ocean rowing, and one is make sure the hatches are always shut.
Right.
Because if you turn over and your hatch is open, it will fill up with water and your boat won't come back up.
Yep.
And the second is always make sure that you're tied on, because the boat is moving a lot faster than you can swim. And people have died, recently in the last couple of years because they've been knocked overboard. They've gone to just reach onto the handrail. Before they know it's a meter away. People are then throwing rope, and soon they are they can't reach the boat, and they've literally just died floating at sea.
Wow, that's quite ugly.
Yeah.
Was there a point? Let's stay on that ugliness a little bit, mate. Was there a point where you feared for your life?
I feared for my life that one night where I got blown off the foot plates, because there's nothing you can really do in that weather, and I felt like we were really out of control. What you're trying to do the whole time is stay in control and manage your situation and be safe. But on that particular night, we were just being thrown around like we were, like chopsticks.
Really?
We had no control. And Mother Nature is a truly terrifying thing, and it makes it. All I remember thinking at the end is we were so lucky to get across. People say they conquer mountains, they conquer oceans.
Yeah.
You never conquer shit with Mother Nature.
Yeah.
Like, it lets you, gives you a brief window. And if you're lucky, you'll get across.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly true, mate. I think a lot of people, they'll say they everything just aligned and you kind of get across. When you got across, mate, you explained the end to us, so let's not go through that again. What did you do in the first few days after, and then also what made you go back and row another ocean 6 months later? This is wild.
Well, you can't walk when you step onto land because you haven't stood up or walked for 2 months. So your calf muscles have just worn away. So you stumble around like Captain Jack Sparrow for a good week.
Wow.
And walking is exhausting. But then you sleep in 2-hour shifts still. Because you're basically,
so you're programmed.
Yeah, you're pretty programmed. It makes you believe that actually you only need 2 hours sleep to be able to operate for like a good 6 hours.
Yeah.
And you're eating a ton because your body is wasted. So you're just eating so much fuel and trying to gain the weight it's lost. But then literally within 4 days, I was thinking, right, I've still got another 6 months left before uni starts.
Yeah.
I don't want to go and work in a pub. I do know how to put an ocean rowing crew together.
Yeah.
The Pacific is way too long. That's 3 times the length of the Atlantic. But there's the Indian. And I always believe that do something once you're lucky, do something twice you're good.
Yeah.
So
I love that one.
So I thought let's try and put an Indian crew together.
How did you go about recruiting them, knowing that good man, best mate, or ex-best mate, we're not speaking for a year? How did you go about recruiting 3 more?
Well, I knew I didn't want to do it as a pair. That was as good as doing it solo. It's torture.
Yeah.
So I knew that doing it a 4 would be more fun and faster.
Yeah.
It's the same as a pair, but you sleep, 2 of you sleep, 2 of you row.
Okay.
Still 2 on, 2 off. But you've always got someone to share the scary moments with on deck, or to share a laugh. And then I wanted big, strong people that were going to literally be able to get good oar speed.
Right.
We wanted to row from Australia to Mauritius. In the end, we had to go to the Seychelles because of weather reasons. It was longer than the Atlantic. It's more desolate. The Atlantic is very busy in terms. It's like a motorway. There's motorways going everywhere. You see cargo ships every single day.
Oh wow!
In the Atlantic, in the Indian, we only saw cargo ships, basically for 36 hours.
Really?
And that's because they're all coming around South Africa and heading for China. It's like a motorway of cargo ships.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted a big crew. I wanted nautical experience. So I got a couple of sailors on board. And then I wanted enough money to be able to put all the luxuries on board that would have made life easy. So
like what?
Well, there's something called an EFOI fuel cell, which powers your batteries even when there's no sunlight.
You were going to say Sony PlayStation.
Now they're probably building rowing boats with PlayStations. They've got so developed. But back.
So what did you have then?
So to power your batteries, which is what you've got to charge your iPod, if you haven't broken it, and to clean your water with, you got solar panels.
Right.
But when it's cloudy and there's not much sunlight, your batteries just don't charge.
Right.
And you've got to hand pump water. You can't charge anything. Life's pretty crapper than it already is.
Yeah.
But this EFOI fuel cell, which costs a few £1,000s, kicks in when the solar panels aren't charging, and it tops up the batteries.
Nice.
So you don't have to worry about power. And things like that would have made life so much more easy.
Yeah.
Things like having iPads, like being able to watch TV shows, because it is the lack of stimulation out there.
Really?
Yeah, that really leads to the boredom, and that's paralyzing.
So you had all this stuff in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
So how did it change the experience?
Having 4 made it significantly easier.
Really?
Yeah.
Because my mind's thinking that 4 is double the complication.
That's fair enough.
But it's not.
You can be like that, but if you have the right characters,
Yeah.
and the right characters, by the way, are calm people under pressure.
Yeah.
They're relaxed people that are going to be on time,
Yeah.
but also aren't going to get scared too easily and are going to pull their weight.
Yeah.
You also, you don't want too many officers. You want soldiers.
Right.
Because you don't really have time to describe why that would be a good reason. You kind of just, if you need something done,
Yes.
the skipper, they need their soldiers.
So you were the
basically to get it
skipper?
done. Yeah, only because I already had experience.
Right.
And it would always be that way around. The guy that has the most experience is usually the skipper.
Right.
But yeah, 4 was much easier, and it should have been a simple crossing, but it turned out to be incredibly complicated in the end.
What happened?
Well, the weather is way worse in the Indian Ocean. Instead of being behind you, pushing you in the right direction, it's just there are swirling storms that go around Antarctica and the Southern Ocean. And they call below 40 degrees of latitude, they call it the roaring 40s.
Right.
When you get into the Southern Ocean, they call it the screaming 60s. And all this weather is pushed up into the Indian Ocean and was constantly trying to capsize us. And we broke 4 oars, so we had no spares.
Wow.
So we had to... Our water maker basically broke, so we had to do a lot of hand pumping, which meant that we changed direction. So instead of going due west to Mauritius, we decided to go with the weather and finish in the Seychelles. Yeah. Which, long story short, piracy is still a big issue. And we had to take out piracy insurance at sea, which meant that if we were taken hostage, because we didn't have any money or anything, any value, it would have been the hostage situation which would had any value. And it just so happened we had one of the richest guys in the UK on board. If we'd called for help, then a boat of Navy SEALs or SBS guys would have left Mombasa and would have taken 2.5 days to get to us. Oof. So that was quite fun. The idea, knowing that we had people watching us, was okay, but it also meant that we had to turn off our tracker, because these pirates, if we've all seen Captain Phillips, they will know where you are from tracking systems. Yeah. And they're not actually coming on little outboards. The outboards live on motherships, which travel far out to sea, and then attack you at quick range. So we had a strange incident just 2 weeks away from the Seychelles, and it looked just like a fishing vessel coming towards us in the middle of the night. So in this situation, you usually get on the radio and you say, big ship, this is little ship. We can see you on our radar. Can you see us? Over. And 99% of the time, they'll come back on the radio. Yes, we see you. We're taking a wide berth. Right. When the radio operator isn't asleep, which they are usually. But this occasion, we got nothing back. And then we did it again, and still nothing. And then we tried to flash them with some big lights, and we got nothing at all. So we thought, okay, that's weird. We've been told we are in an area where this could happen. It's unlikely, obviously, but it's not the most unlikely thing to happen. So we turned off all lights, anything that would emit any light. And it was unfortunate because it was a full moon, so we felt we were lit up like a Christmas tree. and then we just rode as hard as we could for about 4 hours. And you know which direction you're going because of the wind on your face.
Right.
And then it literally passed maybe 50, 60 meters by us, and it looked super weird. And we didn't wake the guys that were sleeping because we didn't want to alarm them, but we were pretty close to pressing like our emergency button, probably unnecessarily. But
And what did it end up being?
we will never know. It was
Really?
probably just an unidentified illegal fishing boat,
Right.
but it fitted like the description of everything we'd ever read about what a mothership would look like.
Wow. Wow.
which makes for a good story. The other thing is that we just a couple of days later, because you rode backwards, one of my oars hit something, and I turned around, and it was a life vessel, and no one was on it. There was an emergency water maker and an empty life vessel just floating, which was quite weird because that person or people had either died and washed off or been rescued, and it was just pretty intriguing to think that there were people out there.
Did you take the emergency water maker?
No, we were close enough then.
Mate, if my water maker had have stopped working in the early parts, I think I would have pinched it. So mate, to cross the Indian Ocean, how long did it actually? You said it was longer than the Atlantic. How long were you at sea for?
71 days.
Wow. So you've spent in total like over 100 days rowing oceans.
About 125 days in just a 9-month period. So I'd spent more time at sea than at land. And
I can imagine that walking when you got back was probably quite challenging. But when you got back, when you got off the boat in the Seychelles, and you probably went through the same walking, what was the decompression after the second row like, and where were your thoughts at?
To be honest, like, growing up is tough. It's even more tough when you think you're super ambitious and have big dreams.
Yeah.
And very quickly you get over the fact that you've done something which is supposedly epic, and you go on the news channels and the radio chat shows, which I did. I did the circuit, so to speak, in the UK for like 6 months, and then you get forgotten about, and no one cares. And you don't even care, and you just look for your next challenge.
Yeah.
And that's life. Like, you're always chasing. You've got to have a goal, because unless you have a goal, you'll just float and you won't get anywhere. If you have something which you're aiming for, it doesn't have to be like a dream, but just something that's so important for keeping motivation high.
Yeah.
And I went back to university 2 weeks after I stood on land in the Seychelles, in paradise, having all your family around you, being told you're the dog's bollocks.
Yeah.
And then you're back in a new class because your year have already finished.
Yeah.
You know no one there, and you're having anthropology lectures, and you're being told that you've got to get a 3,000-word essay in the next week,
and
you just
really
couldn't
don't
give
care.
a shit.
Yeah. It's it's very interesting, isn't it, when that whole decompression time. How long did it take you? What did you sort of, how did life pan out after that, mate? Were you itching a little scratch again? Were you thinking about an ocean, or what happened next for you?
I was totally done with the ocean thing. I mean,
good, good, because we don't have enough time left on the podcast, mate.
It'd be the same stories, wouldn't it? The same stuff happened.
I think both of them are very unique. So what happened next?
Back to university, I hardly graduated. I got something called a degree without honours, which is below a third.
Okay.
Which is pretty special in itself, actually, quite an achievement.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to carry on, like, being an expedition leader. I wanted to, like, do mountains. I ended up sailing the Atlantic a couple of years later on a support vessel for the rowing race, but I was determined that I wanted to carry on, because I felt most alive, like, when you were, like, on the edge and when you're in the wilderness. But quickly realised that that's not really a lifestyle that is particularly good for sustaining yourself. Or
I don't know how it creates like a Tinder profile or anything like that, but it's like, we'll be away most of the year, or we'll maybe not come back sometime as well.
Honeymoon at Everest.
Yeah.
And I'd always loved business, and I found myself, 4 years ago, basically organising like a tiny ultra marathon in Jordan, which was called the Wadi Rum Ultra. And, which is why I was on the podcast, a couple of months ago, talking about where we are now with Ultra X. So life was slow, but I knew I wanted to achieve big things, but in different areas.
Do you have other, I think we're done with oceans, you've said, but do you have other big challenges that you're, aside from making Ultra X become what you and Sam have both sort of dreamed together, or your vision. What is there other challenges out there, mate? Do you want to climb Everest? Is there stuff that you look at and go, yeah, I've earned my stripes on those 2 big rows. I reckon I could take that on.
A lot of the most experienced adventurers, or some of them call themselves explorers, even though there's nowhere left on Earth to explore, they're usually experts in one area.
Yeah.
So they're either polar explorers like Ben Saunders, or they're mountaineers like Jake Mayer or Geordie Stewart or Kenton Cool, or they're sailing specialists like Robin Knox Johnson, or they're ocean rowers, or they're jungle people like Benedict Allen. So, but I would like to, climbing Everest is super commercial.
Yes.
And it's busy up there. Before the Hillary Step, like it's genuinely a queue. But it's still going to be like an epic adventure in the wilderness, and that's
still the tallest point on Earth.
Yeah,
right?
so I've got nothing on my list at all just to succeed in the business world now, but to like disconnect and to go off on an expedition for 6 weeks and just live such a simple life.
Yeah,
like is something which I do miss. But to be honest, I'm lucky now. I mean, just being in flipping Dubai, mate, being on the podcast, I would never have thought I'd be there 6 months ago. So it's funny how if you say yes to things, it's funny how stuff pans out.
Mate, absolutely incredible. Before we wrap up, mate, and I have a feeling I know the answer to this already, but we ask it to everyone. If you've been through a lot, and even at a young age, you've got an incredible amount of experience, and I'm sure, mate, a lot to offer, and with Ultra X you're offering a lot of people a lot of things, and I think it's fantastic what you guys are doing. One piece of advice that you would give to anyone, whether they're thinking to set up a business, row an ocean, or just set some goals, what is Jamie's one go-to bit of advice?
Oh my goodness, I wish you'd given me a heads up.
I rarely do, mate. We used to. You see, I'll talk a little bit now so you can think.
No, I've actually got one. Don't worry, mate. I was just setting myself up. It's if you say yes to things, usually it will lead you down a path which leads to other things.
Yeah.
And I think that people so often spend so much time thinking why they shouldn't do something that they stop themselves. And especially when you're a young person, deciding what to do with your life. I think it's easy to get caught up saying, I wouldn't like that because of that. I wouldn't like that because of that. Just do it. Yeah. And if you don't like it, you'll find that out. But it will
don't do it again.
Yeah, exactly. But it will often lead to meeting people, and relationships are how everything in life and business gets done. It's all relationships.
Amazing.
Yeah, so mate, just say yes, I'd say.
Say yes. There we go. Mate, absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. Second appearance. There's only a very few people that have been on the show twice, mate. You've been on the show twice now within a period of 5 months. You're obviously quite special to me for a number of reasons, but absolutely awesome. Congratulations, mate. I think there's a lot of Guinness World Records out there for dumb shit, and I think you have some for some incredibly dumb shit, but I think that's probably a bit harsh.
Completely
but
true.
But I think what you've been through, mate, is really incredible, and I would imagine in a few years, the way that you've told the story for our guests, I imagine in a few years the story should come back out again, and there's just so much. We could have spoken for hours, but mate, congratulations. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for taking the time to share it with the listeners, and also thank you for Ultra X.
Mate, always a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks.